Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. When the Vermont legislature voted new required agricultural practices into law in 2016, it meant big changes for farmers. The requirements were implemented to protect and improve natural resources such as soil and water. As farmers began to understand what was being required of them and what it would cost to be in compliance, many farmers had to question if they could afford to stay in business. Norman Thibault is a dairy farmer in Colchester. We first brought you his story last year when he was in the thick of figuring out what to do. We went back to the Thibault farm to find out some big changes. Here's Across the Fence's associate producer Keith Silva with our story.
Something big is going up at the Robert and Norman Thibault farm in Colchester.
Didn't sound big when they did the cement work, but when the tank went in, it's like, whoa, you know, you got 1.3 million gallons there. So, but we have a lot of water issue that collects. We're sitting in the hole and there's nowhere to push the water to, so we got to collect it.
When it's finished, this tank will store manure, milk house waste, and water runoff from the barnyard and feed bars. This project is the first step to bring Thibault's farm into compliance with the required agricultural practices enacted by the Vermont legislature in 2016.
Phase 1's almost done. We still got to do the hopper housing by the barn, fill that in, dig a hole, pour concrete, put the pump in, build a building around it, and I still got to seed down around the tank and all that, and that phase will be done, and hopefully later on, early fall, we'll start our barnyard. But we'll finish one at a time first.
Thibault knows this is only one beginning of many. More to the point, the work doesn't stop even when this project is completed.
Pressure is starting to get off my back, tank is up. I'll get the pump hopefully this coming week. We can put the pump housing in and the building, then take a little bit of a break before our barnyard here. And so try to, like I say, we still got to do our little work, the hang and everything else.
Oh, so the farming doesn't stop?
No, the farming doesn't stop. No, that keeps going.
Continuous, steady, constant. Words that describe the life of a dairy farmer and this farm family. When Across the Fence first reported on this story last August, we started with some history. How long has your family been here?
The early 1900s. 1918, I think my grandfather started.
The Thibaults raised 200 cows on about 300 acres. They are one of 3 remaining dairy farms in Colchester. The majority of the farm's acreage is on river bottom land, so it's classified as a floodplain. Any nutrient runoff not absorbed by the land is apt to go right into the Winooski River or Lake Champlain. A couple of years ago, Thibault decided to make improvements to his barnyard and to change how he handles manure, milkhouse waste, and stormwater. He started working on a plan with NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service.
Try to make something simple. We had Danny Pete from NRCS come over, and something small became a big project, an expensive project, and to make things cleaner and make it easier for us. We went along with it, and I figured, 200,000 around there, and it came 3 times that plus.
So what happened? Well, while Thibault was planning the upgrades to his farm, a new law went into effect in Vermont, the Required Agricultural Practices, or RAPs. This new law sets standards to manure application, restricts some farming in floodplain areas, and requires all farmers to have a comprehensive nutrient management plan. Before the law, Thibault could have tackled his project piecemeal over several years. But in order to be in compliance with RAPs, he's going to have to move up his timetable and finish his project within a year's time or face financial penalties.
What you see out here is going to change completely?
Yeah.
Yes.
Tony Kitsis is a farm management educator with UVM Extension.
The cost of doing business has just gone up. If you don't have the infrastructure in place on your farm to farm the way the RAPs want you to farm, you've got to be able to make that investment. There are farms right now where we're having that difficult conversation that says if you don't have the money to put in your 10% share of the total cost of this project, you need to think about possibly exiting. That's a difficult conversation to have.
The price paid to farmers for their milk has been in decline for over a year and a half, so coming up with the money right now is a challenge. Add to that the changes Tebow has to make don't improve his farm's bottom line.
It doesn't add value to the farm.
It doesn't.
It doesn't add value, no. It's going to help better manage, make things a little bit easier, in the wintertime. Clean the barn, it's in the storage, you don't have to remove manure, less handling. I think it's time saving, I'm hoping.
But it doesn't improve the bottom
Value of the farm. No.
Tebow has decided to move ahead with this project. NRCS is going to help with the cost share, so Tebow's contribution will be 10% of $600,000. It's true that these improvements don't add value to his business, but they do improve the value of Vermont.
It's going to help, keep the manure out of the streams. Yes, helping the lake and clean up the water quality.
Today, you cannot afford not to do this.
UVM Extension has been working with farmers to improve their land management through practices like cover cropping and no-till planting. Kitsis and his colleagues held workshops earlier this year to help farmers navigate the law and to understand their rights.
There's not a farmer out there that I run across that does not want to do their job responsibly. Everyone does. My responsibility is to help farms who want that help to deal with the infrastructure side of things, the sort of the large cost manure handling projects. This one is going to cost upwards of $600,000 total now. Certainly money that a farmer doesn't have in a checkbook of this size to write that check. It's also a comprehensive look at where the alternative funding sources are going to come from the federal government and state government. There are some good programs out there. And combining all these resources, bringing it together and saying, here's the package, the financial package that we think can get this project going.
The Tebow family has been farming in Colchester for generations, and Norman Tebow expects that will continue.
Did it ever cross your mind that this is just too much?
Yes and no. I mean, you've got time. I got plenty of life left, I hope. And like the older farmers, they either got bigger, got bull tanks, or got out. And that's where we are now. Move forward, improve, or get out. So farmers are in that situation now, I believe, is you got to change. And it's something that you have to adapt to and work with it. Every farmer is going to be different. It may work for me, it may not work for another farm. The soils I have, it works. And I'm making it work.
Now that this project is off the ground, quite literally, Tebow feels better than he did last year. But as with any project, there were unexpected costs, which have tempered his enthusiasm.
Still nerve-wracking, you wake up that night and think about it. Took out more fill, topsoil, and dirt, and had to bring in more and compaction, dozer work and all that. So it was an extra, $12,000, $13,000 extra that didn't expect. But it's done with now and keep moving forward.
The funding Tebow received to pay for this project from NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, is reimbursed once each phase is complete. In the meantime, Tebow's footing the bill. As for the added expenses, he sees it as the cost of doing business.
There's something always going to come up. Every situation is going to be different. Me, I had a lot more topsoil they had to remove and bring in more fill. Somebody might have ledge or they have to raise it up. I don't know, Every project can be different.
The tank is 112 feet in diameter. If it was stood on end, it would be about as tall as a 4-story building. And as for the walls, they're 19 feet tall. For now.
We can grow this on 2 more panels high. We can go up with it, 2 more. So this one will be easier to expand compared to a hole in the ground.
For Tebow, it's upward and onward. For this project, his farm, and in the protection of natural resources.
We'll keep all the water issue out, and hopefully everything will be pumped in there when everything's done, and make it easier in the wintertime and not have to haul manure, move manure around and all that, and so we can concentrate in doing other work.
For 100 years now, there's been work for the Thibault family here on the farm. And now that this other work is finished, they'll be able to continue farming here, right where they've always been. In Colchester, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.
A footnote to the story: since following up with Norman a couple of weeks ago, the pumps are now online and the tank is in operation. Tony Kitsis joins me in the studio to talk a little bit more about this project and the work that he did on the farm. Thanks, Tony.
Thanks for having me.
And so, what factored into the decision making for this farm?
It was either do the project or decide to exit the farming business.
It was that simple.
It was that simple, yeah. The whole project started with the idea of doing a bit of a barnyard project in the back, but because we are now in the age of comprehensive nutrient management planning, where every aspect of your farm is looked at for environmental controls and whether or not there's potential for pollution, this turned into one of the total packages, the full comprehensive plan.
Have you done any research into those unexpected costs that Norman mentioned?
Yeah, we sure have. We've looked into projects like this, especially if there are management changes that have to happen on the farm. Like in his case, he had to, before the project was even done, he had to figure out whether or not he could afford to buy 2 new manure spreading tanks, which, because of the way his manure spreading management changed, he had to buy some new equipment. And then, of course, there's always that 10 or 15% cost overrun in the end that we're never really sure of, because the projects are all based on estimates.
Is there any way to anticipate some of the unexpected prices?
Yeah, no. You'd love to think that there would be,
Right.
but you just have to wait until the equipment starts moving dirt around to figure out what needs to be done. You know, the engineers can do the best job that they can do sitting in an office and going out and doing some site work, but reality is once things get going, then you understand what the total cost will be.
And it's hard to anticipate because every farm is different.
Every farm is different. You can't really look at this as being something like an average, because one of my old colleagues used to say an average is really one hand in an icebox and the other hand in a roaring fire, and you're sitting somewhere in the middle. It could be anywhere on that spectrum.
And so is there an average amount farmers have had to pay to be in compliance with the RAPs?
Well, it depends. You know, some of the larger and medium farm operations who have already been permitted have had a good opportunity to work with some of the agencies to get some of the infrastructure in place. It's the small farms who haven't really had to deal with that much. They're the ones who I believe are going to be the most challenged, because you know, when you're milking 90 cows like Norman is, and he's looking at spending somewhere around $700,000 for the total package, his share at 10% is a lot of money that he doesn't really stand a great chance of getting milk production back to pay for that additional expense that he has to bear.
Mm-hmm. Is that typical on that size farm?
Typical on that size farm, yeah, especially if you've got to go through all of the infrastructure to manage silage leachate control, milk house waste, barnyard runoff, and then have a good solid place to store your manure for the future.
In your work with farmers, you sometimes have to be the bearer of bad news. What's the advice that you'd give to any farm business if they want to stay in business?
You really have to look at everything going forward. You can't just take things in small components and say, I'll deal with this year and that next year. These comprehensive nutrient management plans, yes, they're necessary, and yes, they're part of the regulation, but at the same time, they really do give you that forward-thinking look so that you don't spend a little money now and realize 3 years from now that you shouldn't have done that.
Mm-hmm. And so once a farm is in compliant with the RAPs, is that the end of the story, or does it mean that these improvements will need more improvements down the road?
Sure. The only consistent thing in the dairy business is change itself. And 3, 4, 5 years from now, things could definitely change. But what we try to do is try to clean up exactly what's there now. Mm-hmm. And as new changes need to come down the road, if they do wind up coming down the road, we'll be better able to deal with it then.
And it's sort of a double whammy for farmers too, because they've got the RAPs that they're working on, and now milk prices are so low.
Yeah, if you had your choice, which would you take? But unfortunately, this is the perfect storm of having both being in a very difficult position where milk prices are low. It's far too difficult to make normal operating expenses. And now for those farms who have to make big infrastructure improvements, they also have the additional loans that they've got to pay. And sometimes that just doesn't fit within the budget.
Have you seen farms go out of business?
We have. We've seen some farms make that difficult decision. Some of the farms don't have that next generation to come along and just ask their son that question, like Norman asked Alex. Do you want to do this? Because I'm not going to be here much longer.
Right.
It's going to be you down the road. And the answer was yes. That was part of the decision to go forward. But if there's nobody there to make that, decision, and you're a middle-aged farmer and decide that I don't want to make a 20-year payment on that, the decision is let's move the cows now.
Tony, thanks for joining us. That's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. I'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.